All right, we move on, and a little bit earlier on we talked about inflation, and it's hit 5.9%, which I think is the third time in 5 months, and that's really affecting everything in the country at the moment. And you'll see it in the fuel prices and food prices in the shops. Things are just going up all the time. Well, the CEO of 60 Global Solutions, a group, Khandani Msibi, joins us now just to chat to us a little bit about what he's seeing and what all of this means. Thanks so much indeed for joining us. Always good to talk to you. These shocking figures, 5.9%, what impact is that having, A, on business and B, on citizens?
Good evening, and thank you for having me. Just a little bit of a correction. It's 360 GSG, not 60. The inflation of 5.8, Peter, is very devastating for South Africa, for business and for consumers. And sadly, for the majority of people, that inflation rate is actually much higher than 5.8%. As you know, the lower paid employees who make up the majority of workers, they spend most of their money on transport and food. And the transport and food is experiencing a much higher level of inflation. I think what you are seeing now is that there's pressure across the board for business and for consumers, for the middle class and the working class. And we want to see as well that there'll be a pressure as well on wages. As workers feel the pinch, they're going to be pushing for more wages. And as a result of that, the businesses are going to be passing on higher prices, and the cycle is just going to continue. I think we're in a very, very difficult position as a country because I haven't heard any real solutions that are coming from leadership in the country in terms of how do we respond to what is happening now, because it is influenced by multiple of factors.
Yeah. Is there anything that companies can do to help cushion the blow for citizens? I know that they have huge input costs. Part of that is distribution, which requires petrol, wage bills, and so on and so forth. But is there any way that they can help citizens not to pass on these price increases?
I think it just depends on the drivers, Peter. I think this is going to be a very difficult period for both companies and consumers. I mean, if you consider the whole issue of the distribution of the wheat and the distribution of fertilizer, which if there's no fertilizer, there will be a shortage of agricultural products in the future. And I think the challenge that we have is that we are not yet seeing the end of the conflict in Ukraine. We're not yet at the point where anybody can tell you with certainty that this is going to end at a particular time. I think the more it continues, the more the pressure in the system, because the more we're going to have a high fuel cost, and the more we're going to have the high food costs coming into the system. I think a lot of businesses are going to go through change. Bear in mind, Peter, that we've just come out of COVID. The South African economy has not yet recovered from COVID. I mean, I flew out of Johannesburg this morning, and the scene that I saw at OR in comparison to what used to happen 2 years ago, it's still a long way before OR can show the recovery that we think that we should be having by this time. And I think that reflects the activity of business, that business people are not traveling as much as they used to. And one would hope that if they are meeting online, at least the level of activity, business activity is improving. But we all know that the economy is not yet experiencing the kind of growth that we need in order to resolve social problems in our country.
So what can government do you think? And I'm asking this because I'm mindful that we are part of a global economy, and we're seeing countries like the UK hitting inflation rates of 9%, and we are suffering at 5.9. So if huge economies, global economies are under the same shocks, surely that means that we're probably going to feel those effects as well, on top of domestic issues.
We are going to feel those effects. I think the UK is much closer to the activity in Europe, and hence the flow of the inflation impact is felt there much quicker, given the fact that the heating price, the cost of actually heating the homes and the cost of fuel is skyrocketing in the UK and is flowing very quickly into the consumer price index. And I think for us as a country, one can only hope that we survive. It's very, very difficult to think about what government can do, because the one instrument that is used to quell inflation is raising interest rates. Yeah. But when you raise interest rate in an environment where the inflation is not driven by excessive money supply and is not driven by excessive demand, and you're having some kind of inelastic demand that doesn't respond to raising of interest rate, we actually are in a situation where we have very few instruments. In fact, we need creativity between National Treasury and the Reserve Bank. They can't continue doing what they've always done. I mean, we've seen how the Minister of Health has reduced the fuel increase, has actually managed the fuel increase in the last month by reducing the tax on petrol and on fuel. But it's a short-lived intervention, because it's coming to an end soon. So we need some very strong interventions, and I think the challenge is up to now the Reserve Bank to use the monetary policy not in the manner that it has always used it in the past, but in the manner that responds to what we have now, because we unfortunately have the twin evils of high inflation and low employment. Now, if you have a combination of high inflation and high unemployment, you are actually in a very difficult position, because if you raise interest rate, as has always been done to deal with inflation, you are actually going to depress employment creation more, which actually means that the vicious cycle just continues, that the people become poorer and poorer because the business is unable to take more loans, and the middle class is pressed even further against the wall, and the little bit that they had in order to take care of the families is actually being squeezed out of their pockets. So we are in a very difficult position. It requires innovation, and it requires that the Reserve Bank should not do what it always does whenever it sees high inflation. They can't raise interest rate, because if they raise interest rate, they're going to finish off the middle class. They're going to make it very difficult for companies to take more debt in order to create more jobs and respond to the other social ills, because we're not having only inflation and social ills. When you're having 10 million, 12 million unemployed people, you're having a very big problem as a country.
You mentioned Treasury, the finance minister defending his budget vote today. Did you hear the right things, the right messages from the finance minister?
I think the sad thing in what the finance minister said is him being apologetic about SOEs. Right? I didn't hear the message that encourages SOEs to become more innovative, to invest in growing the economy, to take advantage of some of the opportunities that are presented by by high inflation. Peter, if you remember the manner in which the SOEs were run, the SOEs were run in order to support business, to support farmers, to support mining. And I think we're at a point where the SOEs are run almost like private businesses that have to pursue their own narrow objectives of survival. I think the disappointment for me is that I would have liked the minister to give the country an indication of how National Treasury is going to leverage its power. Remember, National Treasury collects over 1.5 trillion rands out of this economy. How are they going to leverage that 1.5 trillion rands in order to respond to the challenges that we have at the moment? So I'm a bit not so sure as to whether the penny has dropped, that we're having a crisis, and if we don't resolve this crisis, it will continue to fester, and it will begin to threaten even what National Treasury is able to collect. I think as a country, we are fortunate that during this period, commodity prices are running high, and as a result, we were able to get windfall taxes from the mining industry. But it's just luck, and you can't run for too long on luck. We need interventions now that are going to turn this country around, that are going to turn the economy around. And we need the private sector as well to come to the party in as far as the asset managers, the retirement funds, to invest in growing the economy, to take advantage of opportunities that are created by this crisis. Because every crisis creates opportunities. I mean, a lot of countries have seen that through COVID, as well as through the Ukraine war, that they need to create internal capacity and manufacture a number of goods that they rely on in order to insulate themselves from the price shocks that have come out of what the world has experienced in the past 2 to 3 years.
He talked about the need to review the country's macroeconomic policies. As a businessman, what might be some of the things that you think are essential in terms of a shift in policy?
My thing about South Africa is that we've always had a new fad in terms of new policy. I mean, if you remember, we had the NDP, which they're no longer talking about. The NDP had a target of 2030, right? Now, you have to understand, Peter, that it takes a lot to review and to shift government policies. Government is huge. Government is a national government, it's the SOEs, it's the municipalities. When he says he's going to review it, how much time does he need to review economic policy? My question would be, what projects does he have at the moment in order to turn the economy around? Because there's no point that you write a policy and becomes 400 pages that when you read, by the time you reach the 200th page, you actually have forgotten what was in the first 10 pages. We don't need. I think we need projects and not policies. I mean, we all know what we must do, and government has written policies. There's IPAP. There's all sorts of policies that government has written, and no one has ever come back and said that IPAP has failed or the NDP has failed, and now we must bring another one. So, and we cannot have a situation where every time you change a minister, the new one comes in and starts setting up a new policy. Government has to have long-term policies, but government has to have the projects on the ground. If you remember, in the National Party, they put man on the ground and built Sasol. They put ISCO and also know how ESCO was taken from the mining industry and then expanded through the state. We don't have many of those projects. The state needs to get its hands and learn from doing, as opposed to learning from the boardroom only. We've had a lot of that. We've had a lot of papers that come out, but we've had no implementation. We've had no results, and it cannot be that every 5 years or every 10 years we write a new policy, but we don't show any results because we never have projects. We We need more projects than policies and ideologies.
Mr. Msibi, we're going to have to leave it there. As always, thank you so much for joining us. Your insights greatly appreciated. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much, Claire.